There's something that you're doing every single day that costs you more biologic energy than your workout, your commute, and your worst night of sleep combined. And there's a better than even chance that you have no idea that you're doing it. Welcome back. My name is Dr. Scott, and this is Cellular Truth. I'm a physician, and my thing is figuring out why people feel like garbage when their doctors say everything is fine. Here's what we're covering today. First, what this hidden expenditure actually is, and why your body registers it as a threat even when your conscious mind doesn't. Second, the cellular mechanisms that explain why this kind of depletion doesn't respond to the things that are supposed to fix it. And third, the specific sequence of actually stopping the drain and why the order matters more than tools. And finally, I'm going to show you a combination of two things that will make it nearly impossible to keep lying to yourself, even if you want to. And somewhere in the middle of this video, I'm going to tell you why one of the most popular recovery tools in the biohacking world, something people swear by, spend thousands on, and generally feel works, may be making this specific problem significantly worse. Not for everyone, but probably for you if you're watching this video. You've gotten very good at that face. You know this one, the I'm good but just busy face, the no really I'm fine face. You know this one well, I know this one well. The face you put on before you walk into a meeting, before you answer the phone, before you go back inside after sitting in the driveway for 4 to 20 minutes because you just need a break for a second. You've been wearing it so long that sometimes you generally forget it's there. And when somebody catches you off guard, asks you how you're really doing, or a song comes on that you really weren't prepared for, there's this half second where something underneath surfaces, something you can't quite name. Tired doesn't cover it. Stress doesn't cover it. You're functional, you're performing, you're fine. Your cells, however, have a completely different opinion. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't show up in blood work and it doesn't respond to sleep. You might go to your doctor and they say everything looks normal. Your sleep looks okay, kind of, right? But I call this the exhaustion gap, the distance between who you actually are in a given moment and who you've decided to be in that moment, between what you're actually feeling and what you've chosen to present to the world. Most people carry this gap, usually a very large gap, quietly, right? It feels like a character trait, patience, professionalism, being low maintenance. It feels like something you're choosing. What it actually is a continuous expenditure, running in the background every hour of every day in a way that an app drains your battery in your phone, even when you're not looking at the screen. You know, you have like all those things you gotta X out on your phone that they're still in the background, you forgot to do it, right? And I'm gonna show you exactly what that drain looks like at the cellular level in just a minute, because it has a name and it has a mechanism. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You've heard that line before. You know, that's usually played in jest when somebody says to imagine something you don't want to imagine. Okay, here's the thing that conventional medicine completely misses about this kind of depletion. It's not psychological. It doesn't start psychological. Let's talk about that. The moment you start maintaining a version of yourself that doesn't match your internal state, your nervous system picks up the discrepancy. And your nervous system is not subtle. It doesn't file that discrepancy under minor inconvenience. It files it under something much more consequential. Your body has a surveillance system that is running constantly, monitoring for threats, and sustained inauthentically, the chronic gap, that chasm between that inner state and the outer performance that is, registers on that system in a way that has a measurable biologic consequence. And this is where it gets really interesting. And sequence matters here, and that's why I'm going to give it to you in this order. We're going to start with the cellular mechanism, because without that, the rest of this is just advice, okay? But we want to give you the foundation of it here, and that's what I'm all about, the cellular truth. Then we're going to talk about what most people do first and why it fails, then the correct sequence, and then the tools, because I have lots of tools in my toolbox, anything from cutting-edge technology to ancient technology as well. In order that your system can actually use them, though, we have to do it in the right sequence. Sequence over biohacks, always, okay? let's talk about what's actually happening in your cells when you sustain a version of yourself that isn't true. There's a framework that's been developed by a doctor named Dr. Ravat Navio at the UC San Diego, and it's called the cell danger response. It's what happens at the cellular level when your body perceives a threat that exceeds its capacity to handle normally. And the key word there is perceives, okay? Here's the mechanism. When the cells come under threat, biological, chemical, physical, psychologically, it doesn't matter which one of those it is, they do something very specific, although it's very general to all those kinds of threats. They leak your energy currency, ATP, into the space outside the cell. Now, inside the cell, ATP makes energy. It literally powers everything. You make 150 pounds of this every single day. But outside the cell, ATP is not energy. It's an alarm signal. Extracellular ATP binds to its receptors throughout your body, your immune system, and then inflammation rises. Your vagus nerve, which is your nerve that kind of calms things down, relays this danger signal to your brain, and your nervous system shifts into sympathetic or fight or flight overdrive. What happens here with anxiety, hypervigilance, brain fog? You don't get enough blood flow to your brain, especially if you're under significant stress for long periods of time. Fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. Not because something is psychologically wrong, but because your cellular alarm system is broadcasting, and it will keep broadcasting until it receives an all-clear signal. Here's where self-deception enters the story in a way that should genuinely disturb you. Your nervous system cannot distinguish between a threat that is real and a threat that is vividly, continuously imagined. It cannot distinguish between a danger that exists in the external environment and a danger signal that's being generated totally internally by the chronic tension about who you are, or between who you are and who you're performing to be. Life feels like indeed a stage sometimes, right? We all play roles, but we get so locked into these roles and we forget who we truly are. That's when this tension gets so strong. So research on chronic dishonesty, for example, including self-dishonesty, shows it depletes cognitive resources, elevates cortisol, which is your stress hormone, raises blood pressure, and keeps the nervous system in a state of low-grade vigilance. Your body responds to this threat of the gap being discovered by others, even when your conscious mind has stopped registering that there's a gap at all. You just forget you're playing these roles all the time, and that gap is there, but you're compensating and have no idea. The mask proverbially becomes invisible to you. You've become the role, right? This energy cost is itself, though, is not at all invisible. It's very much there. So it's not the workload itself. It's not the schedule. It's not even the relationships. It's the continuous metabolic load of maintaining a self that isn't the one that's actually living in your body. Which is why some of the most common advice for exhaustion, and I'm going to name specifically in a moment, not only doesn't work, but often makes the cellular situation measurably worse. So what do people do when they feel and they kind of hit this kind of depletion? They try to optimize. They add a new morning routine, meditation, cold plunges, better supplements, or at least ones they found on influencer channels. And to be clear, some of these things might be genuinely valuable, but the clinical problem with applying them here in this specific situation, your cell danger response is active. When your cells are broadcasting danger signals because there's a continuous threat, there feels like there is, you do not have the budget, the energy budget to adapt to new stressors. So hormetic tools are the ones that are causing stress that are supposed to be good for you. They're supposed to help you build back stronger, require your system, but they require your system to have the energy to complete that adaptation. If yourself and your body, if your system is under this cortisol-flooded, CDR-stuck system, there's no resilience that could be built. It's actually going to add load to the system that's already overdrawn. This is the line you need to remember. You cannot regulate a nervous system that doesn't have the energy to be regulated. You need energy to be able to do this. We're not talking about woo-woo, new agey energy. We're talking about cellular energy in the mitochondria, the part of your cells that make energy. Optimization in these cases, or the ones that we talk about here, they're not wrong. It's just the sequence that's wrong. And doing the right thing in the wrong order, physiologically speaking, is the wrong thing. So what is the right order? Step one is not a tool. It's recognition. The CDR cannot complete its healing cycle without the trigger while the trigger is still active, which means that the first task is identifying what is actually maintaining the alarm state. And in this case, that means getting honest about where the gap lives. Where are you performing a self that isn't you, or getting lost in roles that aren't you? Where is this mask so habituated you've stopped even noticing it's there? This is not therapy homework. This is systems biology homework. You are locating the input that is keeping the cellular alarm running. Now, this can be difficult, okay? And this step itself may not be possible without restoring energy. And so that's step 2. So sometimes you have to go to step 1 second, okay? But step 2 is really restoring energy, right? But ideally, you're able to recognize that you're in this loop, you're having these challenges, and you're sort of built these masks without realizing it. And then you can go directly to step 2, which is restoring energy. That can be hard sometimes. Sometimes we just feel burnt out. Sometimes we just feel overstressed, and we don't know why, because this can be almost invisible to us, as I mentioned. And so if that's the case, I always recommend restore energy first, because if you're not feeling good, the first step is to restore energy, because before you can regulate, you need ATP, you need energy currency. This means things like sleep quality over quantity, nutrient sufficiency. Your mitochondria, the part of your cell like that make energy, need specific cofactors to run efficiently, and reducing additional metabolic burdens that are already compounding the drain. This could be doing some of those hacks or some of those optimization tools that are actually making you feel worse. The next step, step 3, is nervous system support. Rebuilding inhibitory tone, restore the parasympathetic capacity that has been causing or been chronically suppressed when your nervous system is just having such a hard time. What I call this is the parasympathetic edge, relaxing the nervous system tone. It's not calmness, not passivity, but the biological capacity to actually shift into recovery and stay there long enough for the healing cycle to advance. And step 4, the final step here, is where performance tools come in, like HRV training, hormetic stress exercises, optimization protocols, not because they don't work overall, but they don't work if you build it in the sequence that's not going to be correct here. So let me give you some tools that I use in clinical practice and also myself when looking at this distance, this gap that many of us have that of the performance that we're doing in the world, and it's just draining the crap out of us at all times, right? So sometimes it's really difficult to know, but oftentimes what people will tell me is that as soon as they started closing that gap by maintaining better energy and working on the psychology of this as well, which is the long-term play, the HRV, your HRV, which is your heart rate variability, the amount of beat-to-beat variation in your heartbeats, it might sound normal to you, but it's actually not entirely normal. It's not entirely regular, meaning there's a small amount of beat-to-beat variability you can't hear with a stethoscope. When your HRV starts going back up, this is typically a good sign that you are having a better capacity, that your nervous system is now becoming more regulated, right? And so your HRV score does not know you told your boss you were fine, as an example, right? It doesn't know you've decided you're handling it. It reflects what your nervous system is actually doing overnight. And for many people, it's the first place in the piece of data that make this hidden drain undeniable. And so if you have a bad HRV, it's likely that you're in stress mode, right? And then the question becomes, what is causing that? And in this particular video, what I've been emphasizing is this gap between the roles that you're playing and believing them and getting stuck in them along the way. And that's draining you, okay? But the HRV, once you start optimizing and looking at those steps, energy first, nervous system regulation, and then optimizing overall from a long-term perspective with mitochondrial function, then your HRV is going to start improving. And that's a great marker for this, right? I think that there's a great additional tool that I love that helps right away, and that's usually using a combination of low-dose clean methylene blue in combination with red light and photobiomodulation, actually, because this combination is going to restore energy flow very, very quickly. Methylene blue gets activated or synergizes with near-infrared light about 680 nanometers. And so if you have mitochondrial activation, you're going to turn that CDR response, that cell danger response, you're going to let it resolve itself. There are 3 stages to the cell danger response, and I'll talk about this in more videos. But in general, you want it to resolve, okay? And it will resolve if the cells have more energy. And combining it with low-dose methylene blue, somewhere between 8 and 25 milligrams, and red light therapy, or near-infrared light therapy, about a 680 nanometer wavelength, is a great combination to give the system energy now. Once the energy is given, well, then what happens? You can now downregulate the nervous system in a much more robust way. And then long term, you can understand what to do with this gap that has been created in your life and rebuild scenarios, rebuild ways to actually fill that gap and become more authentic in who you are. So let's go back to that driveway. It's 6:47 a.m. Your car is off. You're not quite ready to go back into work another day. Here's what you know now that you didn't know at the top of this video. That 4-minute pause isn't weakness. It isn't laziness. It is your nervous system doing the only thing it can really do to interrupt a pattern that is running at a cost that you were never consciously tracking. The face you've gotten so good at wearing, that I'm fine face, the professional face, the patient face, it isn't free. Your cells have been paying for it in ATP and energy and cortisol and that extracellular ATP alarm signals from the cell danger response that never fully quite clear. The path forward isn't adding more. It's closing that gap slowly, systematically, in the right order. The driveway pause is your body's first attempt at an honest conversation. It deserves a real answer. And so we have to learn that there is a gap there and close it, right? So the most counterintuitive thing that I can tell you, and I mean this as a physician who has spent years in this space, is that the most powerful intervention for this kind of depletion isn't a protocol. It's accuracy. Getting accurate about where that gap lives, where the masks are, what the stories are that are costing you. Your cells have been keeping an honest ledger this whole time. They've been waiting for you to look at it, and that's the work. Not harder, not more, just honest. And then, in the right order, everything else is going to get easier. The key with all of this is sequence, to recognize the problem, right? You know, if you hear Alcoholics Anonymous, it's like number 1 is to recognize you have a problem. That is hard for us in modern society. We are basically programmed to wear these masks and get lost in them because we want to be a good person. We want to be helpful to others. We want to be a good, mom, dad. We want to be a good worker, right? But if there's so much of a gap between how you're showing up with those things and who you truly feel you should be on a regular basis, this is causing a significant amount of stress on the system over time. The cellular truth here is that it's not just the body that keeps the score. It's your cells, it's your mitochondria. That's what keeps the score in the end. So we have to rebuild in a beautiful sequence that takes all of this to heart. Thanks so much for listening. We'll check you next time. This is Dr. Scott.